Welcome to Sarnia.
As usual, this video is designed as an aid to exploration. Log off the computer.
Pull up this video on your phone and go for a walk. Each time I'm done talking about a building, I'll throw up a map to get you to the next one. Pause the video and take a stroll. Indeed, feel free to wander off script for a while. I'll still be there when you get to the next site, and there's always another side street to explore. Sarnia, unlike many of southwestern Ontario's cities, doesn't really have a clear founding date. The area had been the site of a Chippewa settlement in the early 19th century, and later was the home of French farmers who lacked legal title to the land. Gradually, a small settlement grew up on the site, but the growth was sufficiently gradual that the founding of the city is usually dated to 1836, when a meeting was called to select a name for the settlement. An acrimonious debate ensued between the respective merits of Buenos Aires and Glasgow as a name, and Port Sarnia was finally settled on as a compromise no one particularly wanted, but everyone was willing to live with. From such unprepossessing beginnings, the settlement grew rapidly in the latter half of the 19th century, growing not only as a regional centre for Lambton County, but also as a major transportation hub. The city's first railway, the Great Western, arrived from London in 1858, followed hard upon by the Grand Trunk Railway the next year. Sarnia established itself as an important railway centre, as the railways ferried freight and passengers across the St. Clair River to Port Huron. At the same time, the port at Sarnia expanded dramatically, with first sailboats and later steamboats connecting the growing city to ports on Lake Huron and Lake Superior. Sarnia also benefited from the discovery of oil in Lambton County in the 1850s. Oil was never discovered in significant quantities in Sarnia. The big finds were further east in an area still identifiable on maps by town names like Oil City, Oil Springs, and Petrolia. But despite early efforts in London and Petrolia, by the end of the 19th century, the refining of oil had been concentrated almost entirely in Sarnia. The first commercial uses of oil focused on the extraction of kerosene for lamps, with gasoline being discarded, frequently dumped into the streets, as an excessively volatile waste product. Sarnia boomed in the late 19th century, and acquired a dramatic collection of excellent Victorian architecture in its core. The city's architectural stock has suffered extensive loss through the years, however. While demolition has taken its toll, far and away the greatest loss dates to 1953, when a tornado ripped through downtown, destroying much of Front Street and leaving substantial gaps elsewhere, many of which remain unfilled to this day. Today's walk begins on the intersection of Christina and Rochon streets. The northeast corner of Christina and Rochon was for many years the site of Sarnia's City Hall. An impressive Italianate structure built in 1877, the commission for the building was largely responsible for enticing George Waddell, a young architect from Grand Rapids, to take up residence in Sarnia, becoming for a period the city's only resident architect. The erection of such an impressive municipal structure, together with the establishment of a municipal waterworks 2 years earlier, reflected a growing confidence in Sarnia's future as a regional centre. The City Hall served for 3/4 of a century before being demolished in 1953. Christina Street is Sarnia's principal commercial strip and boasts an excellent and eclectic collection of architecture from a dozen different decades. Of particular note is the Tom Block on the southwest corner of Christina and Rochon, built in 1893 and remodeled into Sarnia's art gallery in 2010. Walk half a block south on Christina Street to the Imperial Theatre at 168 Christina Street. The Imperial Theatre is a solid Art Deco building erected in 1936 to plans by Kaplan and Sprackman, an architectural firm from Toronto specializing in the design of theatres. Built as the Capitol Theatre, the building was originally a movie house, playing the best of early Hollywood's films. The theatre closed in the 1980s, buffeted by competition from suburban theatres, and was threatened with demolition. In 1997, however, it was renamed the Imperial and reopened as the home of Sarnia's Community Theatre Group. From the Imperial Theatre, continue 2.5 blocks to the intersection of Christina and Wellington streets. The building on the northeast corner of Christina and Wellington is Sarnia's Public Library. The city's first public library was established in 1900, and was such a success that 3 years later the construction of a dedicated building was accomplished with the help of a grant from the Carnegie Foundation. An impressive classical structure, the building was the work of Marcus Burroughs, a young architect who would later move to Detroit and design many of the city's new library branches. When it was built, the Sarnia Library featured a reading room open to the public, and closed library stacks from which librarians would retrieve books upon request, a practice nearly universal in libraries at the time. Within a decade of its opening, however, the Sarnia Library began experimenting with allowing the public direct access to the bookshelves, making it the first library in Ontario to do so. While Sarnia's library is still located on the site, The 1903 library was demolished and replaced with the current structure in 1960. Across the street from the library, on the northwest corner of Christina and Wellington, is the Lawrence House, one of the most elaborate residences in southwestern Ontario, built for William Lawrence in 1892. Lawrence was a prominent lumberman, and his house is littered with every imaginable wooden ornament. Following the death of William Lawrence's widow in 1940, the house sat empty for over a generation until the family finally decided to donate it to the city of Sarnia in 1977. Following extensive renovations, the house was opened to the public as a museum, a role it continues to serve to this day. Turn right, walk a block west on Wellington Street to Front Street, then turn right again and walk a block north on Front Street to Davis Street. You're standing near the site of Sarnia's first passenger station. The Great Western Railway, Sarnia's first, arrived in town from London in 1858. The Great Western and its rival, the Grand Trunk, had been racing to complete their Sarnia branches first, with the Grand Trunk not completing its line to Point Edward until 1859. Both railways treated the city as a major port terminal, with traffic for Lake Huron and the Upper Lakes being directed over the railway to the Sarnia docks, and well into the 20th century this stretch of the St. Clair River was dominated by the interchange of goods between ships and railway cars. The southeast corner of Front and Davies is home to Sarnia's post office. Located conveniently near the railway station, the first post office on the site was built in 1904 to plans from the Department of Public Works in Ottawa. It was an impressive Beaux-Arts building, faced with Credit Valley sandstone and topped with a clock tower visible along the entire Sarnia waterfront. In addition to serving as the post office, the structure housed Sarnia's Customs House and a number of federal offices. The building was demolished in 1958 to make room for the present post office. Continue walking north 3 blocks on Front Street. In the 19th century, Front Street rivaled Christina Street as Sarnia's principal commercial artery. The street, however, was particularly hard hit by the tornado of 1953, leaving large gaps in the streetscape, many of which remain empty to the present day. Given its proximity to both the waterfront and the railway, it's perhaps no surprise that Front Street was home to many of Sarnia's best hotels. Sarnia's best hotel for much of the early 20th century was the Vendome Hotel, a large building built in 1892 on the southeast corner of Front and Cromwell and destroyed in the 1953 tornado. Also of note, and still surviving, is the Belchamber House Hotel at 178 Front Street, built in 1866 to plans by David Murray. At the intersection of Front and George Streets, turn right and walk a block east to Christina Street. The building on the northwest corner of Christina and George is Sarnia's City Hall, built in 1965 at a cost of $1.5 million. The city had been housed in temporary offices since the demolition of the old City Hall 10 years previously, and the new space was reflective of the extraordinary prosperity Sarnia's petrochemical industries experienced in the middle of the 20th century. From here, you could return a block south along Christina Street to return to the beginning of the walk. If you're interested, however, you could continue north to visit a selection of excellent churches, beginning with St. Andrew's Presbyterian, immediately north of the City Hall. St. Andrew's dates to 1841, Sarnia's oldest Presbyterian parish, but the present structure was erected in 1867 to plans by James Anderson. When the church was first built, the bell did double duty, both ringing to call people to church on Sunday mornings and ringing to alert the town in case of fire, an arrangement which appears calculated to cause disaster, although in fact it never did. Of note are the wings flanking the building to the north and south. They were added to the church in 1881 to expand seating capacity, an unusual solution to a problem typically solved by extending the church to the front or rear. From St. Andrews, walk 3 blocks north on Christina Street to the London Road. The church on the northeast corner of Christina and London is Our Lady of Mercy, Roman Catholic. A handful of French Catholics had cleared farms in what is now Sarnia before the arrival of British settlers, but the establishment of a parish had to wait until 1840, when local notable George Duran donated the land and lumber for the new church. The present church is the community's second structure, built in 1879 to plans by local architect George Waddell. The intersection of Christina and London has been treated poorly through the years, with only the Catholic Church remaining to mark what was once an extremely attractive intersection. The most notable loss was the Gurd Mansion, a spectacular Second Empire residence which was built on the southwest corner of the intersection in 1874 and demolished in 1964. In addition, Sarnia's courthouse was located for nearly a century in a large, if architecturally uninspiring, stone structure immediately north of Our Lady of Mercy, while the city's first Anglican church was located in a Gothic building immediately to the east. Turn right, walking a block east on London Road to Vidal Street, then turn right again, walking 2 blocks south on Vidal to Charlotte Street. Closely associated with Captain Richard Vidal, St. George's is Sarnia's oldest Anglican parish. The parish's first home was built in 1848 when Captain Vidal commissioned Alexander Mackenzie, a local mason, to build a church on London Road. Alexander Mackenzie would later go into politics, eventually becoming Canada's second Prime Minister. The parish, meanwhile, outgrew their original structure, and in 1883 commissioned Henry Blacker to design a new, larger church on a site closer to the city centre. Of particular note is the Turnbull House, immediately to the north of St. George's, which today serves as the church's rectory. The house was built in 1866 for John Turnbull and is one of the oldest surviving structures in Sarnia. Walk a block east on Charlotte Street, then turn right, walking south a block on Brock Street to George Street. The last of Sarnia's 4 major 19th century churches to be erected, Central United was built as Central Methodist Church in 1883, to plans by Sarnia architect George Waddell. The building was one of the last commissions Waddell designed before returning to Michigan, where he had practiced in the early 1870s. We've reached the end of the walk. From here you can return to the beginning of the walk by heading 2 blocks west on George Street and 1 block south on Christina. Alternatively, you could spend a few hours exploring the attractive residential streets, which stretch out to the east from Central United.